Hello, everyone. I feel like this been some time again since last time we spoke on here. I think, oh, maybe it's been 2 weeks. Jenny has been here with us for a little bit back. And so I just wanted to say hello, everyone. My name is Raditya Lazary. For those who don't know me, I'm the creator of Mindful Being and this beautiful panel discussion that I'm having new and sometimes revisiting and sometimes continuous people that come and join me, like Diana. And Swati currently is in India, so she is unable to be with us, but she'll be back in, well, this May, so probably June. And so today and actually all the topics we're talking here are topics that are usually causing us to be on the vulnerable side and can be very, very uncomfortable at times. And what we're trying to do with these conversations today around loneliness is to open up the conversation around them, feeling more comfortable talking about them, and also acknowledging the experiences that we're having. Because if I think about it, we creating these experiences. It's not necessarily like if I just read loneliness and the description of it, it's only because people have this experience certain things and then people have to create a word for it. And here we have that word. We could use any word in the end, what we want to call it, right? And so what we also discovered is there are many different words out there that actually describe that sense of being by yourself. And depending on how that shows up in your life, it relates differently to your experience. And you can change the way you relate to those experiences. So by today, we're going to listen to each one of us sharing our experiences around loneliness. And we're just exploring on how they have affected us. And sometimes there's strong emotions. Sometimes there's just, those coming and going kind of emotions, and sometimes we just don't know where to go with it. So, well, I'm going to just open it up to the two of you if you want to just start off with a scenario that you wanted to share how you see loneliness. I love to share mine as well. So it really is up to the group here today how they want to go about it, because as those who have listened before might know that there is a lot to unpack when we come together talking about anything emotional. So yes, anybody want to go first? Well, there is Diana Van Borg, and we have Jenny Mortag, just so I introduce them as well. I know they've been here, so for me, they're like I introduced myself. I practice now. And I just look at Diana's eyes and I just know, how about introduce yourself? So I did it. I'm so proud of myself. All right, I'll just start. So there is two different places that I actually realized that loneliness has showed up in my life. One particular experience that I had is when I went to England to learn English, as English is not my first language. That was, I don't even know. It was around 2000, because I remember it was like 1999 into 2000. It was like that turn around. And I went there, and you go into this language school. So I went to language school in England, in Cambridge, and you don't know anybody. And when you go to a language school, there's usually a chance that someone from your country is there too. Happens to be, I'm from Switzerland, so there were some Swiss people, but for some reason, I just couldn't connect to them. I didn't know why and how, and so that was very difficult. So it took at least a month, or it was in between, like I right away connected with some people, but then some people left, as it happens. If you have never been to a language school, it's a lot of turnarounds and people stay for years, sometimes just a few months. Anyhow, so I really felt extremely lonely for a period of time, and I did not know what to do with myself. I didn't want to be that person that sits at the lunch table by itself all the time without anybody sitting there. So as Cambridge is a very beautiful town, you have a bike. Every lunchtime, I took my bike into town so I don't feel this isolation. that I didn't experience that loneliness there, where you see other people but nobody's talking with you for whatever reason, right? And so for I don't know what and how, I just realized, like, this is the situation. This is not what I want it to be. So let me do the best of it. So every lunchtime, I explored Cambridge. I found beautiful places where I had lunch at different universities that are so magnificent. If you've never been to any of these colleges, probably in the States are very similar. If you go to these cities that have these old school universities, you have that sense, and it was just so beautiful. So I really connected with my surroundings. So that's my one little story that I had. The other one I'll save for later because it takes a little bit more emotional impact here on myself, so I'm going to share this in a later. So maybe someone else want to share their story around an experience they had. Yes, Diana, go ahead.
Well, if it's okay, Jenny, because after Raditya's sharing, it felt like natural I would fill it in because, well, as you know me now, by now I have many examples, but I'll start with this one that actually when I was little, when I went to school, I was bullied there because I was different. You know, I wanted to study. I didn't want to go out and have fun and skip the classes and stuff like that when I was coming into early teens. And I was different. I felt different in school. In family, I felt, you know, at home there. And I had friends and my cousins and so on. But in school, I felt different. And I felt quite lonely because they started to bully me. They started to throw things at me. They took my things during, and I had this strong feeling that I don't care. I want to finish the school. The grades are important. I don't care. I don't want to. But in a way, I think it threatened people, and I felt so lonely. So I remember when I went in 8th or 9th grade in school, I was very lonely, and I came home and I was crying, and I even faked that I was ill so I didn't have to go to school. To that point, actually, that I actually got ill after a while, and I got sore throat, and I got some fever actually. So this is one of the stories. I will also say the other ones, more emotional ones, for later. And I want to tell another one for you, Raditya, also, because since you know, I've been moving countries as well. I've been moving places, and yes, being new in a new place, it's always scary, and there have been also moments when I moved to Sweden that I felt lonely. But even actually when I moved back from Australia to Sweden again, I felt also lonely because I felt that I've seen so many things and I've changed. But when I came home, everything was the same. And I felt also a bit lonely in my mind, that like no one gets me. Even though I had people around me, I felt that no one gets me. I feel different, but no one sees that. And the same when I go home and visit my family in Lithuania, sometimes it felt like that, you know, you feel kind of lonely because even though you have people around you, you don't connect as well as much because you have been to so many places and seen so many things, and it changes you. So that's one story.
Thank you, Diana. Yes, Jenny.
Okay, so both of you inspired me to think of a completely different story than I was going to go into. Raditya, because you called me out, I always go into the parenthood because I'm thick in parenthood now with my 3-year-old, and I'm a parent coach with the Parent Empowerment Movement. But there was a little stint in my life where I had just moved to an area, luckily not a different country, but I moved on the west coast of the US from Southern California to Washington, where I currently am now, which was a cross-country trip, and I soon realized was a very big cultural shift. And I was at this point in my life, I'd been doing preschool for probably almost a decade. And I thought, like, I kind of want to know what it's like just to have a normal desk job, because, and I'll talk about this when I talk about parenthood more, like being surrounded by kids, running around crazy kids and other adults taking care of kids actually can feel very lonely, because all of the focus is on, like, we got to keep the kids alive. We got to enrich them. We got to overlap our breaks. So like we would never eat lunch together because we couldn't legally, because someone had to be with the kids. And so I just kind of wanted to take this break and see, like, what is it like to work in an office and have a lunchroom, you know, have tea and coffee breaks. I'm like, I kind of want to just feel what that's like and like take a break from like the exhaustion of preschool. And I remember getting this job and being really excited. There was like this pod of like 15 people in this like lovely little room right in the middle, this kitchen or whatnot. And then I realized the first couple of days, oh, everybody has lunch in their office with their doors closed. And I was like, no, you can't do this to me. So I was going to meet people. So I was going to make friends. So I was going to like get this life experience. So I was like, okay, I'm going to think about this. And so I actually decided that I was going to very intentionally sit in that lunch area by myself and see what would happen. And I'm very, very grateful I did that because, you know, people would kind of come in and out. They'd get stuff out of their fridge and like we'd have some little conversations, what now. But pretty quickly into it, another person who had only started a couple months ago soon started saying, hey, can I come sit with you and have lunch? And we started regularly having lunch. And then eventually other people kind of pulled in to very soon, the culture of the office changed. People had lunch in that room together and people got together. And it honestly, that bond actually helped us get through a very traumatic time in that office. And it helped us actually stand up for each other when we needed to. It helped us advocate for each other later on. And it taught us each a lot about how important our connections to each other were. So that was a really satisfying experience because in that instance, like it was other people getting to come together, recognizing like, yeah, I was feeling lonely too. I didn't really feel like I had an option about that. Or maybe some of them like didn't even know like, oh, that actually would be nice too. So that felt really good to connect with other people who were feeling that same thing and recognize like, okay, just because this is what's happening doesn't mean it's what everybody else wants too. So that felt really empowering. And it just was a really great reminder of that we're a social species, we're a community, we do need each other. We're going to need that solitude and alone. I think that is a positive aspect of loneliness that I know we're going to dive into. But it was really nice to recognize that was what was happening. It wasn't what I wanted. Let me see if I can get others on board with me.
Oh, I mean, kudos to you. Wow, such a great success. And why I'm so excited is because your experience with loneliness was tying both of our experiences into what is possible. Obviously, Diana and my experience were early in our lives where work wasn't really existent, right? Like where the separation of work is created by us. The experience that we're having is separation from people's experience and not being able to connect to one another. And how Diana described her experience was more like, oh, let me find a way to still see myself part of this. Where me, I just took myself whole out of it. And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go do something else. So this is showcasing that, and your example is showcasing what we both were doing, that there is different ways that we can go about them. And it's about taking action and not to fall into the misery of our experience, which again is not limited to the experience of loneliness. It can be to any of the experiences that we touched on in the past and will be touching in the future. Is always to come from where we are and not stay stuck with how it's been or how it affects us, that there is power to taking action for our own sanity. Right? So by knowing, like, for instance, in Diana's case, like knowing like I'm being different because I have different goals and aspirations than other people have, additional to having a different background, right? And understanding how that plays a role in how we live our lives. We never are going to be exactly the same. And the example of Jenny was to really showcase that there is a time and place for being by ourselves. And yet there's more power when we come together, especially when we're talking challenging times. because we cannot foresee challenging times. And you switching from, pre-K to an office space, I mean, that alone is a huge step. Going from children to grown-ups, you're probably like, well, you know what? I think kids are more grown-up than adults.
Oh yeah, I left saying like, I want to go back to people who are at least acting their age. I lasted 1 year. I'm like, all right, that was fun.
Well, you learned a lot, I could say, just from this short share, which probably happened at the beginning, and the challenge probably came in a little later in the game. So a beautiful story here, if that was just a year vacation in a different job. Yes, Diana, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you, Aditya, and thank you, Jenny, for sharing that. That was beautiful. You show the power of, power of presence there, and and yes, people usually are lonely, and it sounds so sad that everyone is sitting in their room, and it was a beautiful example. When you talked about, I was working in the office, and I changed to working with kids. So I totally get it. That's why I wanted to say that, because it brought me to this, now it's more emotional story, is that I was working at the office in the finance, and I mean, I was good at it, and I found friends, and we, made activities and had fun. But this feeling inside me that I wasn't totally myself, and I wanted more, and I was in the wrong place. It was always in there, and I felt lonely there as well, in a way, because felt like no one got me. And then later on, when I went through depression and burnouts and so on, and then I started to work in this school with kids in primary school. Actually, there I finally felt that, wow, I belong here. I belong with kids. I belong with, other people who are working with kids and teaching them and seeing them. And I just felt like, the people with my own, and especially now, and with you two, and with Mindvalley as well, I felt like like-minded people, and then finally felt that, well, I'm not different. I'm feeling like a like-minded community, and it gives such a strength. And there comes the story that when I was depressed and burned out, I felt so ashamed, and I felt so lonely. That loneliness was so hard that sometimes I didn't want to live, because I felt so different, so lonely, and so guilty and ashamed of that, being ill, not being there for my kids enough, not being a good wife, not being able to be a good role model for them because I couldn't work. And, I was painting this picture for my future, that I would destroy my kids' future by being me, and it was so painful and so lonely, because I didn't dare to speak, because this shame and guilt was locking me in. And then I finally found this conscious parenting quest in Mindvalley. That's why I was so passionate about that part, is that they had this tribe where you could share. And then people started sharing, and I was starting reading their stories, and I finally realized that, guys, I'm not alone. There are many, many parents that are feeling exactly the same thing. And so I started to share, and I noticed that people started to react, and we started this communication, and it just felt lighter and lighter and lighter. And then I realized I'm not alone, and it really helped me heal. So I'm just so grateful for it, because that loneliness, I'm getting teary-eyed now, because it was so deep, and it was so painful. But as we say, coming together with other people, realizing that we're not alone, it's truly powerful. So thank you.
Oh, Diana, I love you. Thank you for being always so vulnerable and open with your experiences, because you can only help people, and you know that because of your own experience, how much people have helped you by being so open, and you just demonstrated this. No words. I don't want to say anything else. Thank you.
Diana, I'm so happy to hear you say that you found your village, you found your tribe, and like a place where you could share these stories. And I don't feel like validation is the right word, but like to be able to like look another person in the eye and say like, I'm going through this, and for them to be able to even be like, yeah, I know my unique story is different, but my experience is so same. And that's really powerful. And I feel like so often in life, like the more willing I am to share the deeper stories, the weirder stories, I think I'm just figuring out this little piece of trauma I have, or this little piece of that, and to share with someone, and someone be like, yeah, everything you're saying resonates with me. Like, that's such a, I don't have a word for that feeling. And I'm really, really grateful you got that.
Well, isn't that an opening to getting more vulnerable in this conversation, huh? Yes, I know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Jenny, is there anything you wanted to, evolve into some, parenting experience that you had that stranded you lonely, as, Diana was expressing, as a reflection of your experience, or other people that you noticed that affected you that way?
I can't think of a specific memory or what feels like a significant story, but I feel like our daily lives, my daily life as a parent, I feel like there are little instances of that. The word isolation is what comes to mind here. And I remember even thinking yesterday, I was a little bit off yesterday with my son. He's almost 3. And I'm really glad I was able to pinpoint, like, okay, I'm feeling off. I'm just having some emotions. I'm having feelings of anxiety creep in. I'm having feelings of frustration. Those are just feelings, because I was noticing, like, I could easily just start kind of zoning out, being very lonely while right next to my child, next to one of the people I love more than anything else in this world, but could still feel lonely if I kind of was in those thoughts other ways, or if I recognized, like, I was putting so much of myself into his world, into his life, and kind of forgetting who I was, or forgetting to take care of myself, even doing something like taking a 15-minute break to breathe, to, like, I've sometimes just sat on the couch next to my child, said, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to look through this magazine right now. Like, just something to kind of take that break, to step out of that role. When we're in a caregiving role, I feel like it's very, very, very easy to lose yourself. That's something I noticed as a preschool teacher. It was a huge norm. It is a huge norm in this industry, to work through illness, work through injury, work until you physically can't be at work, because of the passion for caring for young humans so intensely that you forget to care about yourself. And then that kind of gets reinforced with the cultural values we have for teachers, for young children in general. It's like, oh, this is this world. The rest of us are going to go play in the real world. And so my last job was working at a preschool on a college campus. And that in itself felt isolating and alone, because we were a key fundamental support. Like, our mission was founded to help students meet their goal of getting an education, despite whether or not they had a child. And yet we were forgotten. There was even a case where the campus was evacuated, and no one called the center until very, very late. So this feeling of just being forgotten, or kind of held at arm's bay, whether you're a parent or whether you're a caregiver, can be very real. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this. This kind of went there, but isolation, I think, is something that a lot of parents have to contend with. And it's taking a minute to step back into yourself, which kind of feels scary. If you're feeling isolated, to go further into yourself can be a little scary, but it kind of gives you a chance to remind yourself who you are, what you want, what you need, what you deserve, so that you can then move forward and go back and interact with the world and ask for that and engage with that and create what you want, I think.
You just described, thank you too. You just described actually probably what the experience was for Diana, like all of a sudden being reminded of what I'm really here to care for, and like this challenge between work and home, and like noticing home is actually more important, though work has been significant to just be something in the world, right? But then having children like brings you to another aspect. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, Diana. I know I see you nodding. I just feel like the way she described it was kind of reflecting back on what you said, just from a more like observant space, and maybe someone that hasn't really acknowledged being lonely or isolated in that case can now maybe see how your situation really happened by what she described. Does that make sense, or does that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm now afterwards, I'm very grateful for this situation, because I feel much more whole inside than I was working in a finance. Something was off. I wasn't fully myself, and that's why I was feeling lonely. But when I get into myself and listen to me, what's important to me in life, then I make choices out of it. Then I feel in peace and more calm, and I don't feel lonely. Even though I sometimes ponder, as Raditya knows, when, here in Sweden, everyone is working because it's equality, and women and men are working, which is great. It is, but there are nearly none mothers, and especially with kids who are almost teens. My son is teen and my daughter is preteen, that are still at home, not working. So in that situation, when you talk to other people, you can also feel alone and lonely, actually, which I sometimes do, but it's more when I'm in my head. But when I put myself back to the ground, and I hug my kids when they came from school today. Today my son was sad for something that happened in school, and just being there, able to sit there with them and listen to them, and just hug him and give him a sandwich, and just just be there for him. It's worth so much more than just stressing around somewhere else, and for my own work, and not being able to be there for him, because I learned myself. I know that I'm very intense person. So when I'm with someone, I'm very focused on that person. And if I'm working, I'm very focused on my work. Then I don't see my kids in a way. So I had to choose, and I had to choose from within. And when I listen to myself and not too much in my head and my fears and something, then I feel peaceful. So yeah.
That's great awareness. I mean, that's just, again, this foundation of awareness and breath just comes back into what you do and why you're so passionate about all these ways of being, and that we discuss all the time. And technically speaking, in 2 weeks, the theme would be breath, but I don't know if I'd be able to be here. So this might still be on the hold. I have to get into my schedule and figure that one out. And that would be the case. Obviously, Diana has to be here when we talk about breath, because that's just what comes to mind. And everything you guys are saying makes so much sense. And I just wanted to share a little bit more emotional story here, because it's the other side. Me too is just as Diana described, I'm a more, very firm, focused on certain things, and that can be a lot for people. And it was a lot, and still is a lot, for my family. So I just came back from visiting them for a few days, and I had so many revelations from this trip, because there's something that, just a small thing that lasted maybe 10 minutes, that happened by like me saying something came back to me, my dad saying something in return, and feelings came up, and I was just like, okay, what is this? Like, let me just understand it. So when you go to see your parents for a shorter period of time, it's actually a healthy thing to do, because you don't have to stay with these experiences for longer periods. You can just have this one experience and then leave, and then have something with it. So anyway, the story about this, or my experience with it, was that I'm a very emotional expression of, like, I'm expressing my emotions very easily. This is one reason I'm, in the mindfulness field. This is why I'm holding these spaces, is because this comes very easy to me, no matter how uncomfortable it makes me. And I realized on this trip that my parents are not comfortable with discomfort. They are not able to deal with my emotions. They are not able to see me for who I am when I get into the state of emotional expression. And that has caused me to be the outsider, that had me to be the person that wasn't belonging to the family. Because, you know, when you're a teenager, you want to be heard and seen. And my parents were not able to do that. And I realized this as I'm preparing for today. I realized that that was part of me feeling lonely within my own family, because they just didn't understand. They didn't understand who I was, nor did they have the mindset to have time to understand who I was. My dad was just too, you know, his past was too much for him emotionally, that he could not deal with his emotions. So whenever it became too much, he just shut down and everything is bad and let me just walk away. My mom, she would make space for it, be okay with it, but she couldn't really get to me in that space. Like she was connecting, but not on a emotional space, more on a motherly space. And so that caused some friction inside of me, because I just couldn't express myself in a way that I wanted to express myself. Or rather, I did express myself, but it wasn't received, and I wasn't being able to be catered to and cared for in those times. So I was telling my mom actually that I now realize that there was nothing wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with me being the way that I was and still am. What's happening is that I just trained myself to be comfortable with discomfort. And my parents, especially my parents, just never had the interest nor the time to attend to those discomforting moments. So the easiest thing to do was to blame me, or to point the fingers at me, or to judge me for being that person. Yet, it's not necessarily a judgment, blame, or whatever I just said, because they just can't express it any other way. So what I really learned on this trip is, as much as I want them to see the beauty of these spaces that I'm creating with you too, the power of being aware of your positive and negative emotions, being okay with things not going the way you wanted, as much as I am extremely passionate about this, they will not be interested in it forever. That's just what I'm going with. If at any given moment they change their minds, and maybe they say, hey, about this thing you said a few years ago, I want to know more about it, I'll be all in it. And I said this on the drive when they picked me up from the airport to go home. I told my dad that if he ever wants to know more about the work that I do, because it can be really supportive in all the things we go through life, I'm here to do that. And he will probably not. And yet he respects the space that I'm creating, even if he doesn't know it. So I just have learned so much that when we talk about loneliness, it's again a creation that we make it. We don't have to stay stuck in loneliness. And for me and the experiences that I had, even though this morning when I thought about it, that made me cry, obviously, because it's hurtful to think that I have to move across the ocean so I can be with my parents in a normal space. Because if I would live within miles or kilometers of them, we probably would have driven ourselves nuts by now. I probably would never learned anything about mindfulness in the way I have learned on this distance. And I would have just been too much for them. But if I see them 3 to 4 times a year, I think they can handle it. I think they can be okay with me maybe being a little bit too much at times. And I can just say, like, guys, that's just for a period of time. I'll leave soon. Don't worry. I just have to be me. I can't be someone else that you want me to be. I can't cater to you so you can just live the life you want to live. That I don't understand how you could live that way. But again, this is their life. And so for me, the message today is really to learn more about yourself if you're willing to. And if you're not willing to, let other people be who they are, because that will drive us into isolation and loneliness 100%. Because exactly what Jenny was talking about, her lunch table. At some point, people will see you for who you are and what you bring forward. And you will see down the line the power of connection, the power of family, the power of seeing people for who they are and not who you want them to be. So thank you that you let me share my story. And yeah, anything you wanted to say?
I think that's incredibly powerful, Raditya. And I love that you bring it back to, you have to be who you are. And that is the way to be the least lonely, to be your authentic self, to be your genuine self. It can feel lonely, especially when we start to, Diana, like your example, when we live to our values, regardless of they're the ones that other people's have around us, like you mentioned at school. Because I know I felt that way as a parent when I'm like, I know this isn't the norm, but this is important to me, and I'm going to do it. And at first that can feel really jarring and comfortable. But the more, I believe that the more comfortable we get with ourselves, the more accepting we become of ourselves, the more we work through whatever emotional, energetic, stuck feelings we have, any blocks, old beliefs we have about, us being wrong, or this is because I do this differently or whatnot. As we work positively through that, to love ourselves more, to accept ourselves more, to take more pride in who we are and what we're doing, it becomes less and less lonely, because one, you recognize that you don't need anyone else's approval but your own. Not that that's easy to embody every day, but once you know it, you can't unknow it. So that takes one layer of loneliness off, because you're not looking for other people's approval. To other people around you that may not share those same values but still love you, as you talk about, Raditya, can see you better and because of your willingness to do it and your confidence of doing it, they're willing to dance with you. It's like that energetic attraction that happens. So they do become closer to you again. And then 3, you start noticing the other people in life who do share those things in common, who you do resonate with you. Like we have this beautiful panel right now. I love being here. I feel tingly good being with the two of you. And when Swati's here, it's just really magical. And so the more true I am to myself, as much as that's focused on myself, the less lonely I feel, even though that means I'm going to call for times of solitude and alone, which is different than isolation or fear or worry or those other the duality of loneliness. And I guess it's meant to be that complete package, because it's really hard to grow if you don't have a reason kicking you in the butt to grow.
So beautiful. So thank you first, Raditya, for sharing your story, and thank you, Jenny, for summarizing it so beautifully. And I totally agree. As you said, it's when I centered, as you talked about, Jenny. Now it's when you are listening to yourself, or truly yourself, then you are less lonely. You don't feel lonely, but it's not the same thing as being alone. I don't know why. I just thought about myself going alone, in the winter and with my bicycle and swimming, and people are looking strange at me, even though it's getting more and more popular. And it's just like going into that water and doing my qigong practice afterwards. I can guarantee that there are some people looking at me, she's cuckoo, she's crazy, but the funny thing is, I don't care, and I don't feel lonely, because I feel that's something that is good for me and I love it and it's healthy for me and it brings me joy and I'm not hurting anyone. So so that's a good thing. So yeah, I'm just grateful once again that we are talking about this. And I remembered another thing, it's expectations, as you talked about, Raditya. Again, coming back from loneliness and expectations, releasing the expectations of others. It's such a big thing, such a big burden to release, because both on yourself, but also on others, expectations for others to change. And that's what I'm always talked about when I was more active in the conscious parenting part, that every time I said to everyone, don't focus on the other person, work on yourself, be more yourself, and the people who will notice you will see that they actually will align and they will actually change somehow. So it could be that your parents will start to show more appreciation, will start to show more interest in what you do. My dear beloved father, before he passed away, actually, he started to understand more and more on what I do. And I think he appreciated, actually, he was talking about that. And it really warmed my heart, because I didn't think that he would understand, you know, these kind of things, but he actually did. And you never know, people, just being by yourself, you are inspiring others. And who knows, maybe your parents will one day ask you, because we'll get curious, but they have to go and to get there in their own pace, because we all have our journeys to go and we all have our pace in which we walk this life. And yeah, you never know. But the most important thing, you have to be true to yourself, because when you aren't, it's very painful. So.
Yes, thank you. That's me putting my expectations really low. You know, that it's never going to happen, so I can be surprised that when it does happen. And obviously the hope is always there. So yes, and I'm always happy when I'm having these conversations with my mom and I can see her like drifting off in like thoughts, because she can't comprehend everything I'm saying. And so I just want to go back to number 3 that Jenny was talking about, that is what keeps me going, is because of the people that I meet that are as query and crazy and whatever you want to call them, to call my friends, because of this, because of these panel discussions, because of the conversations that we're having, because we're getting vulnerable. We then find the right people we want to spend time with, and not because they're pretty or because they're well educated or because they're this. No, because they're living from their hearts. They just connect to what's happening right here, and they are not apologetic to who they are. And this is, you know, I just had this thing with my mom. It's like, oh, this is this friend that you're having, this weird friend, and this is that. It's like, dude, your mom, all my friends are weird. I don't think I have any normal friends. And she was like, yeah, you're right. So here we are. This is who you are. You're a crazy, not fitting person because you need to belong. And once we strip off everything, we can actually see the true person that we truly are. You could walk around with the garbage and people will still recognize you for who you are, because they don't see the garbage. They see your heart, the words that you speak. And so with that, I really want to say such great gratitude to both of you and everyone who is on this journey with me, being vulnerable, talking about difficult emotions and emotions on the whole, and really are interested in discovering and being curious what life has still to represent to us, because what we have seen so far is only a glimpse. So I cannot wait till next time. So thank you so much for whoever is watching this. Let us know what you like, what you didn't like, what you want to hear more of. We do not care. We will keep doing this no matter what. And if you like it, amazing. If you didn't like something, we'll include it in our next conversation. So with that, again, thank you so much to the two of you, Jenny and Diana, for being so loyal and always showing up on time. And till next time, you'll know about it. Thank you for both of you.